What does the future of South Africa look like? Well, I think that we actually are quite fortunate that we have a bit of a preview of where South Africa is heading, and that's in our universities, the University of Cape Town, Wits, and so forth. So then you got to ask the question is, well, what's happening at South Africa's universities, and in particular, what's happening in the Student Representative Council? Now, a lot has been written and a lot has been said, but I think that what a lot of people don't focus on enough is what is happening at our current universities. And the reason why is because South African students that come out of the universities go on to fulfill influential roles in institutions all throughout South Africa. So in many ways, the future of South Africa is going to be influenced by those who are coming out of the University of Cape Town, Wits, and other universities. Now, when it comes to the University of Cape Town, which is one that I'm very familiar with because I studied here, a lot has been written, one by Professor David Benatar as well as Tim Crow. And what they describe is a university whose standards have been dropping and are dropping. They also describe a university where there is a very narrow line of discourse, so it's very narrow ideas as to what is acceptable to talk about, which leads to self-censorship. There has been the replacing of standards with diversity, equity, inclusion, transformation, which is detrimental, because if you don't have standards, you just have slop and everything goes downhill from there. It's a very interesting thing to think about. You know, when you go to a university like the University of Cape Town, you see the beautiful trees and the buildings, and you might think to yourself, well, things are going really well here. I mean, the buildings themselves, they're not looking too bad. There's a little bit of decay here and there. But really, you have to think about what is going on at the heart of the university. And the heart of the university is the SRC, the Student Representative Council. And the reason why is because that council gets voted in by the students. And so whoever is running the SRC is an indication of where the students are. And these are the students who are going to be future leaders. Now, at the UCT, which is the university I follow quite closely, for the last 7 years or so, the EFF, SASCO, have been dominating the SRC. The DA are irrelevant. DASO, they are basically non-existent in a meaningful sense at the University of Cape Town. It's dominated by the radicals. It's the people that talk about free stuff, free education, free healthcare, free land, free everything. And we know that this whole free stuff, just giving out free things, is foolish, it's unwise, because it creates people who are entitled. When you're entitled and you have a whole generation who are entitled, then when they suddenly don't get their free stuff, what do? They get angry and you have violence. Entitlement breeds violence when entitled people don't get what they are promised. So political promises or freebies is very dangerous, and we have this all throughout South Africa and at our universities through organizations like the EFF. So looking at UCT, you see the last few years EFF have dominated, SASCO have dominated, the parties that talk about free stuff have dominated. Now, this is very concerning for the future of South Africa, because it means that students are voting them in. And if you look at the election from this year, 2025, which will flow through to next year, that SRC Council will be in for next year, 30% of UCT student body voted and the radicals won. The parties of freebies won, which, as I've said, any party who talk about free stuff and make promises of free stuff are foolish and are going to drive that place off a cliff, because it creates entitled people, and entitlement, when you don't get what you've been promised, you get angry and you burn stuff. I mean, that's just the way it's worked for thousands of years. But the students voted them in. Granted, it was only 30%, but that's still quite significant. And how many other students didn't vote who would have voted for the radical freebie parties? The ones that will most certainly drive South Africa off the edge of a cliff. And so when you start to look at the heart of it, South African universities are not in a good place at all. It's not just the drop in standards. As I say, the replacement of standards with ideas like diversity, equity, inclusion. Then standards go and you have slop. It's not just that which then leads to degrading of ultimately the buildings, but then you also have examples of what people call as like anti-white sentiment, where there are examples of where you have these race quotas, the quota system. The new Employment Equity Act is obviously ultimately going to affect our universities. And so now you have more of this injection of race quotas. The whole quota system, the pencil test, which is quite a foolish way forward if you ask me. So anyway, what all this is telling us is that the future of South Africa is going to be influenced by students coming out of the universities. That's the critical point that I'm trying to make. And that people need to wake up and to think about. In 30 years' time, South Africa is going to be influenced by the students at our universities who are voting in the radicals and who are being influenced by them and who are themselves being radicalized by all sorts of ideologies. It's not just critical race theory, but all sorts. Very narrowing of as to what you can talk about, the drop of standards, the self-censorship. So when you look at it like that, it then makes you say, okay, well, what do we need to do? Like, how should we respond? And I think at this point, the only way forward is for people to build independent institutions, new education, resource, business, security, and so forth, all these kinds of institutions, independent institutions that will be able to mitigate against what I see and many others see as a potentially sort of disastrous situation where you have the radicals coming into places of influence in South Africa and they're coming out of the universities. That's what I see happening. So people, if you're watching this and you live in Johannesburg, Port Elizabeth, Cape Town, Durban, you need to seriously consider, how do we build independent institutions? How do we decentralize? When a fire is burning, you want to burn fire breaks. How do we burn fire breaks? That is the sort of thinking that we need to think about at this late stage. Could 10 years ago, if really competent people had got into the education system and made sure that the standards were not dropping, I think we could be in a different point. But right now, where are the people getting into our education? Where are they who are trying to really put an end to this? I just don't see them there. And people are trying, but to little success from what I can see. But anyway, I hope this has given you a thought as to where to look for to understand the future of South Africa. And it's the universities, it's what's coming out of the universities. And the reason why is because universities produce future leaders. Thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.